Hello, welcome to this webinar. My name is Phil Laidler. I head up the consulting practice at STL Partners, and I'm welcoming you. Welcome, good morning for those of you in the US, good afternoon for those of us in Europe, and good evening to the folks who are joining us from Asia. We've got a presentation here which we're going to run you through. Before I do that, I just want to do a little bit of intros. So if we could just have the next slides. What we're going to cover today is, following the introductions, we're going to take us through some findings from some research we've recently undertaken, and that's been research involving some interviews with operators, but also with over 1,000, a survey of over 1,000 consumers, and they're understanding their attitudes to their broadband services and other services around that. And we've got some key findings that have come out of that, which we'll take you through. So without further ado, quickly introduce myself. I've done that. My colleague Darius is going to take us through the first part of the presentation, and he's going to be followed up by Nick, one of the other consultants on the team. And then we're going to have a panel. I'm going to take your questions, and we're going to be joined by Michael Dennis from Cisco to address any questions you've got arising from this research, or more broadly, what our observations are on the consumer broadband market. So let's kick off. For those of you not familiar with the WebEx the technology here, that GoToWebinar rather, you've got, you're all on listen only, but you've got a Q&A session here. We invite you to any questions that arise at any time during the presentation, the webinar, please do put them in. We will do our best to address the questions, and we will do that at the end of the session, the presentation. Also, just so everyone knows, we will be sharing this presentation. We will also be sharing the recording, and we'll get that out to you probably tomorrow. And the other thing that we'll be doing is taking all of your questions and doing our best to address those that we're not able to today in writing, and aim to get that to you next week. So any questions that you do submit, we will do our best to address them. If we're not able to do that on the call today, we'll try and do it in the course of the week and get that off to you. So that's it. What I wanted to kick off first, give you a little bit of background for the research. So as I mentioned, there were two stages in this research program. We conducted a set of interviews with some operators, primarily in Europe, but also in Asia Pacific, and one or two further afield than the European market. And then we took those findings, which were really interesting, and we went out to a wider audience of about 1,100 respondents across 8 markets, and we asked them a set of questions about their current use of broadband, their current suppliers, their current services that they had, their attachment rates of other services to them, and also more specifically, we did a deeper dive into their use of cybersecurity and their attitude towards purchasing cybersecurity offerings from their broadband service provider. And we used conjoint analysis, which is a slightly more sophisticated survey tool to help understand the various trade-offs and get a sense for where they placed value and what sort of value they placed on those services. So I will hand over now to Darius, who's going to take us through the first half of those findings.
Great, perfect. Thanks a lot, Phil. So the first kind of thing that we wanted to approach was that the consumer landscape is changing and it's complicated. And owing to this and what follows kind of through the rest of the presentation is this idea that operators need a strategy to actually stay relevant in this changing consumer landscape. And so the first thing that we wanted to take you through was, well, what are these changes? And the first, which I don't think anyone would necessarily disagree with, is that broadband and connectivity are now more critical than ever. Kind of in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic, there is much more home working. Consumers are video calling with friends and family to stay connected. And in fact, one of the interviewees who we spoke to mentioned that actually it's kind of like a new Maslow's pyramid or hierarchy of needs. Before the basic needs were food and shelter, but now that we're not able to physically see each other, that actually staying connected to one another becomes pivotal. And really it's connectivity and a strong broadband connection that actually underpins a lot of that. And so consumers now have a much heavier reliance on broadband and in-home connectivity than they ever had before. Kind of coupled with this is this idea that consumers are becoming increasingly impatient, and you know, this was before the COVID-19 pandemic that a few telcos pointed out that this theme, but we feel, you know, it's enhanced by this pandemic and the fact that broadband is now more critical, that consumers need things now. They need coverage everywhere. They need super fast coverage to be able to video conference and to be able to give presentations. And so in all walks of life, consumers are becoming increasingly impatient. And what these two things lead to is this idea that consumers then have higher expectations because of their the essentialness of the connectivity, and because of this impatience and this understanding that, you know, they should be getting higher speeds than maybe they are in certain areas. They have these higher expectations on what they can demand from their provider. And one example that was given was the idea that previously, you know, kind of 5 years ago, having broadband in the home or having good broadband signal near the router was sufficient for a lot of consumers. And, you know, having it in the living room, being able to, you know, stream something near the router was only really what they needed. Whereas now you need to be able to stream, and you need high performance connectivity throughout the home. And this is quite a change that was apparent in the past few years. One of the quotes that we have here is actually saying that demand and that higher expectation goes beyond just the core services, and actually consumers are looking to their telcos to deliver more and to provide value-added services and make things a lot easier for them than just providing core broadband. So using that broadband as almost a control point, being able to leverage new services, and that's kind of where consumers are moving. And, you know, we mentioned that this idea, a lot of that was driven by COVID, and of course, you know, we couldn't not mention it because it has created such lasting changes in behavior. But what we also saw was that consumers are actually increasing in kind of their confidence around technology and their use of technology, and I guess their maturity around this. And this was mentioned in the interview program, but as Phil said, you know, we conducted a survey, and one of the questions that we asked was, well, how would you describe your confidence in technology? And we had these 3 tiers. So in the dark blue, we had avid user. So this was someone who is very comfortable with technology, willing to kind of troubleshoot their own network, happy to set up and configure their own solutions, something like a hardcore gamer where they're very performance orientated. A moderate user, which I think most of us would fall into, where, you know, we use broadband for a lot of things, streaming, and then the light user, where, you know, maybe not digitally native, kind of go online really just to check emails or maybe the odd kind of e-commerce, but really you're not using technology that much. And what we could see was that the global average for moderate user was around 51% of respondents. Global average for avid user was around 33, and the global average for light user was 16. And what we've highlighted here was that, yes, although there's a key kind of inverse relationship between age and technical maturity, so those in the 51 plus group, for example, only 18% consider themselves avid users, whereas in the 25 to 30, it's up at 51%. You know, there is this relationship, but what is clear is that even in this 51 plus group, you know, it's over 70% who consider themselves moderate or avid users. And so there is this general increase in technical maturity and confidence in being able to use tech, and therefore demand more from your technology, because these consumers are much more aware of the performance metrics out there and the speed that they could be getting, and so they're becoming much more demanding around that. And I think, you know, telcos need to find a way to meet these demands. And what we're showing on the rest of this slide is that same kind of segmentation, but looking across region and actually looking across existing spend. So we bucketed these into kind of low ARPU users, so spend between $10 and $30 a month, to high ARPU, where it was kind of plus $50 a month on their packages. And what you can see is that this technical maturity, or this self-confidence about their technology and their use of technology, doesn't vary significantly. And so it is kind of a global trend, and it's applicable to many consumer segments, that they're becoming more technically mature, and therefore demanding more from their telco. So that's kind of painting the idea that the consumer landscape is changing. But one of the other things that we mentioned as a key point was that the consumer market is complex, and it's therefore quite difficult to segment. Whereas kind of in the large enterprise sector, it's a little bit easier to kind of segment customers, maybe by vertical, and therefore tailor a proposition or a product. It's a little bit harder to do that in the consumer market. And there are a few strategies that telcos mentioned, you know, one around price sensitivity. You know, there are consumers who spend less and consumers who spend more. There's digital confidence, as we went through on the last slide, and you know, people who are more technically mature may be more willing to buy additional services and more innovative services than those who have less knowledge. And age, which was kind of a proxy for both, where telcos felt that younger consumers were perhaps more price sensitive than elderly ones, who just kind of want the best products. But also, as we showed on the last slide, younger consumers probably more confident in their use of technology and willing or able to purchase more interesting services. But what we wanted to show with this next chart from the survey, where we asked which percentage of respondents purchase additional services beyond connectivity from their broadband provider. And if we focus on the right-hand side first, and we look at these self-proclaimed technical maturity buckets that we detailed on the previous slide, what you can see is that avid users do purchase more than light users, and there's quite a clear step change and pattern between those behaviors. But where we saw previously that age was quite a good proxy for technical maturity, we don't see the same pattern of purchasing additional services across age groups. So there is variance and there's nuance, and even across region, if you look kind of detailed at the different countries, there wasn't a clear pattern between consumers' buying behaviors. And so what we kind of draw out as the bottom line from this is that, yes, you can use these high-level segmentations and some key demographics to inform your go-to-market strategy, your channel, your product, your portfolio. But realistically, there are a lot of nuances to these segments, and even within age, it can be broken down by region, by their digital confidence, by so many different factors that kind of compete and interact, that it's difficult to create such a clear-cut segment as it is with enterprise. And so kind of the key takeaway and what we talk about in the rest of the presentation is this idea that operators need to find products or new products that have a broad market appeal to kind of, or at least try and circumvent some of this segmentation, so you can do it at a bit of a higher level. So here we just wanted to launch a poll just to see and hear from you guys where you think the kind of biggest opportunity is for telcos in the home, and what is potentially this service that could have broad market appeal. So you should hopefully be able to see a poll on your screen, and you should be able to collect some responses. So a couple of the options, there's remote monitoring and healthcare, B2C healthcare or telehealth, smart home. There's the role of cybersecurity services in the home, which could be becoming more important, generic entertainment, and then kind of pay TV on its own. So we'll give a little bit more time just to see kind of where you guys feel the opportunity is, and then we can have a look at the responses and hopefully tee up the rest of the presentation. Okay, great. So it looks like we've got the majority of votes in. So I should be able to share the results. And interestingly, what we can see is that kind of smart home comes up quite high at 26%, 23% for entertainment services as well. People think this is a clear opportunity. Slightly less on pay TV, which is quite interesting, I think, for the next section that we'll talk about. But still a few people as well quite interested in cybersecurity and remote monitoring. So quite a good spread, actually. No one clear winner, which makes the rest of the presentation, I think, a little interesting. But good to see people's views. So with that in mind, it was quite interesting that it was the minority who felt that pay TV was the biggest opportunity, and why that's interesting is because the pay TV market has been extremely attractive for operators. However, at least from the interview program, what we feel is that this pay TV market may be maturing, and telcos might need to look beyond the traditional triple and quad play for new growth and to win in the home. And so what we have first here is painting the idea, well, it does have broad market appeal, pay TV, and it is one of the services that applies to a lot of consumers. And so this chart on the left is looking at, of respondents who did purchase services from their broadband provider, the majority purchased pay TV. So it's almost 60% of those who purchase services are purchasing pay TV. So it's clearly got a broad market appeal. And when we looked at this across the consumer segments that we looked at on the previous slide, so age, region, kind of self-proclaimed technical confidence, what you can see is that this doesn't vary significantly. Again, there's a bit of a pattern between avid users and light users of technology, but it's still around kind of 60% of users who are purchasing pay TV from their broadband provider. So having, as we said, that broad market appeal. But as we mentioned, it might be time to look beyond this, because because of the idea that pay TV is maturing. And we have another quote here from the interview program that TV was a big differentiator for a long time, but he felt that at this point his TV propositions, because the competitors were getting much better, that actually their TV proposition was taking a hit. And so because of this competition and this market becoming saturated with players like Netflix, Amazon Prime, but also competing telcos. So this interviewee was from an incumbent telco who had a pay TV service kind of first, and now challenger operators are coming in with their own pay TV offerings, saturating the market, and so pay TV becoming much less of a differentiator. And so kind of the key takeaway that we feel there is for operators is that they should look to diversify. And there are a couple of ways to do this. One is to create a more holistic entertainment proposition. So a few of you mentioned entertainment as kind of the key opportunity for telcos in the home, and I think we would tend to agree. Moving into things like music, esport, gaming. The other option is to become more of an aggregator instead of investing in your own original content. So, developing that pay TV to bring in co-opetition almost with players like Netflix, Amazon Prime, so you can partner and create kind of a holistic content offering. And then the last one is explore new products, and this is kind of where we'll be focusing the rest of the presentation. So operators are exploring new products and to find these new ways to win in the home. And a couple of reasons for this we've already been through. So obviously the pay TV market is maturing. Operators need these new and broad-reaching ways to stay relevant and avoid this commoditization, but also the idea that pure connectivity or pure broadband network differentiation is difficult because there is a lot of shared fiber, there's a lot of wholesale, and so actually competing directly on performance can be a little tricky. And so there were three kind of propositions that came out of the interview program that came out as really strong contenders. The one was entertainment. So, looking beyond pay TV and saying it's not just something to abandon, but it's something to augment and bring in new opportunities and create that holistic entertainment proposition and package. There was the smart and secure home. So a really strong right to play for the telco in smart home solutions, where it's around trust and reliability, and with the broadband network and the router as a control point, actually being able to integrate solutions from different and multiple vendors in smart home solutions, where I could have a smart fridge, a smart speaker, smart locks, smart energy, and all these different systems from different startup vendors, where the telco has longevity and the ability to kind of integrate or create dashboards around that. So quite interesting propositions around the smart home. And then cybersecurity, which came out from quite a few of the interviews as almost the holy grail of the consumer market, and this idea that now more than ever, as consumers are stuck in the home and in fact kind of fulfilling enterprise tasks but on their home network, needing to protect in the home becomes pivotal. And what we'll talk about a lot through this presentation and through the report that goes with it is this idea of creating peace of mind. And consumers now more than ever need that peace of mind and that comfort that they're protected and that they're safe. And so cybersecurity came out as quite a key proposition. And so we just have some evidence from the survey that starts to back that up. So again, showing of respondents who purchase services from their SP, what percentages purchase what, and what you can see is that behind the triple play, you can see music streaming comes up, smart home, cybersecurity, and gaming. So looking at entertainment, smart home, and cybersecurity as behind the kind of quad and triple play key propositions to move forward with the SP. Now, interestingly, quite a few of you guys in the poll put kind of B2C telehealth or remote monitoring solutions as a potential opportunity. And we as STL do a lot of work in digital health, and I think we would tend to agree. And in fact, we recently published a report called Coordinating Care of the Elderly, which looked directly at this market. And so there is a clear opportunity there, and especially in the wake of COVID and needing to do things remotely, there's clear traction around the move towards telehealth and potentially B2C telehealth. Operators like KPN have seen clear success in this market, and the significant investment in this space, not just from telcos, but also from startups looking to move here, healthcare application providers. There's a lot of work going on in this space. But what I might put to you guys is the idea that operators may struggle with a B2C healthcare proposition. It's not a natural channel for patients to purchase a healthcare solution. operators at the moment may not have the same gravitas or right to play in the area if they don't partner or have a strong partner to move into the B2C space. And so we feel that telehealth outside of Southeast Asia, where specifically mobile operators often have quite strong relationships with their customers and have a large customer base that would be willing to adopt these solutions. We feel outside of that, there might be more success in B2B healthcare or B2B2C. So that's kind of one key point as to why telehealth is clearly important for telcos, but maybe B2C, maybe not so much. And what we think is that successful B2C plays might be linked to a smart home proposition anyway. So rather than being specifically a medical device, it might for chronic disease management or remote patient management, it might be more of a kind of a smart buddy that sits in the house and helps elderly patients, when to take their pills or to communicate with a clinician. So maybe moving slightly towards a smart home proposition anyway. And the reason that we focused again on smart home and cybersecurity was that these propositions really do build on the idea of the telco as a trusted partner and as a way to successfully win within the home. So without further ado, I'll actually hand over to my colleague Nick, who will take you through some of the detailed analysis that we did specifically on cybersecurity.
Thanks, Darius. Nick here. So what I want to show you in this section is some more detail on the cybersecurity opportunity, which we explored through our interview and consumer survey research program. We did some specific analysis in the survey. So we can take you through that. In front of you, this is our general takeaway from that research, and that is that there is a growing demand and willingness to pay for consumer cybersecurity, and telcos are well positioned to meet this. Darius, if you could just request. There we go. I've got control of the screen. Perfect. So the first question we asked consumers in the survey was, is cybersecurity and data privacy a concern for you? And this graph shows the two main responses we drew. So in the light shade, you've got those who answered that cyber threats are a concern. These people, and this was indicated through the consumer survey, through selecting these specific answers, these people are aware of cyber threats and cyber attack surfaces, although not necessarily at a granular level, and not necessarily aware of specific cyber attacks. The dark shade on the bottom here shows people who responded saying they felt cyber threats were a major concern. And these people were more aware of specific cyber threats and specific cyber attack surfaces. So at a high level, what this graph is telling us is that the majority of people are concerned about cybersecurity. And what's that perhaps not so surprising, intelligence around and education around cybersecurity is increasing. But what we did find interesting was that both these responses indicated that there was a change in behavior. So this again was indicated through the questions asked in the survey. So the majority of people modified their behavior online. So this might be not clicking on certain emails, not going to certain websites because of an awareness of cyber threats. And we felt this is a good proxy indicating not only that there's an awareness of cyber threats, but that there is a need for a solution to that. If there's a solution that will eliminate the need to actively change behavior online, then there will be a take-up for that. And so we asked more directly, are consumers willing to purchase cybersecurity from their broadband provider, from their operator? And you can see the responses we drew in the table before you. And so the answer we got back is, in the majority of cases, yes, over 70% across most of the segmentations, the kind of broad and well-known segmentations we did. A few exceptions with North America, 69% of people said they would. Light users, as defined earlier in the presentation, those who are less digitally confident, 62%, but generally above 70%. And this was echoed actually what Darius said earlier about cybersecurity being the holy grail. This was echoed in our interview program, and a lot of operators were very interested in cybersecurity and felt that it was a valuable service that consumers wanted and they trusted operators to provide. So this one Northern European operator described it as the holy grail of the consumer broadband market. And in their words, they felt that it was a way that appeals to many segments that can not only drive higher ARPUs and push consumers onto premium packages, but can create stickiness and reduce churn. So that covers the kind of demand side of things. And now we want to look a little bit more into the supply side. And those questions and answers are a little bit more complicated. And, historically, telcos have not succeeded particularly in supplying the consumer cybersecurity market. There's been low adoption rates. There's been perhaps a lack of understanding and awareness of products and difficulties around installation, etc. So we asked consumers, what's been the main barrier for you adopting a cybersecurity service? And 40%, almost half of respondents named price, cost of the service. Interestingly, at the bottom, only 5%, so 1 in 20, said that the barrier for them was not understanding the threats or services. So that tells us that there is an increased awareness of cybersecurity. Now what we did with our survey, we actually did some particular analysis around attributes of a cybersecurity offering. So just to give a bit of context to these graphs in front of you, they were done through a conjoint analysis. So those of you who aren't aware, conjoint is a specific statistical technique that asks respondents to perform choice-based trade-offs of different attributes to give a relative scoring for different attributes. And so we did this with cybersecurity. And we put various data situations in front of consumers, and this yielded many data points which an algorithm was able to rank for us. And so you can see on the left here that the price per month of a cybersecurity offering was the most important to consumers. Second was product set, and by product set I mean what exactly went into the cybersecurity offering. Was it malware protection? Was it content filtering, parental controls, or was it both? So product set was closely behind price per month in terms of importance. And lastly was installation methodology. So was it automatically installed? Did it have to be installed on many devices? How much maintenance did it require, etc. So this pie chart, this is the average across all responses. Was generally true across all major segmentations. Where there was a difference was when it came to younger age groups. And so this graph shows if we segment by age group, what are the what relative importance of a cybersecurity product do we get? And you can see for the younger age group, 46% relative value to product set compared to 35 to price. Whereas if you look at 51 plus age group, only 33% to product and 47 to price. And this was a little bit surprising because it went against what we were hearing back from telcos in the interview findings, where they expected the inverse scenario, where younger people a little bit more price conscious, shorter pockets, and older people more willing to spend. So this is interesting, and it suggests that maybe that thinking, at least for cybersecurity, that thinking around age group and maybe needs reevaluating. So to dive a little bit more into the preferred product set for a cybersecurity offering, again, this stems from our conjoint analysis, we put 4 bundles in front of our respondents. And you can see these 4 bundles in this table. So bundle D contains malware protection, phishing, device hijacking protection, and parental controls and content filtering. That was the all-in-one package. Bundle C, only malware protection, and parental controls and content filtering, kind of halfway there. Bundle B, malware protection and phishing and device hijacking, also halfway there. And then bundle A, just simple basic malware protection. What we found was that bundle D came out on top, so the all-in-one cybersecurity package, and that kind of echoes this peace of mind proposition that we think telcos should be going for. And this graph specifically shows marginal willingness to pay. This is set against a baseline, which is taken to be bundle A. So bundle A is offered at $0, and what we found is that respondents on average are willing to pay up to $4.36 for bundle D before they start turning their nose up and saying no thank you. So this was quite interesting. And we also looked at those same responses around bundle and marginal willingness to pay across different segmentations, and we found that it still applied for low ARPU segments. So here in this graph we segmented it by average monthly spend on broadband package. So the low ARPU section up to $30, medium ARPU 30 to 50, and high ARPU 50 plus. And we found that even for those low ARPU customers, they are willing to pay for that all-in-one package. For those spending $30, they're willing to pay almost just about 10% of their broadband monthly spend. So those are all of the findings I wanted to report back from our consumer survey around cybersecurity. But I also want to return to this point about operators should be seeking to build a brand based on reliability and trust. We think cybersecurity is a good way that operators can go about doing this. And the findings we got back resonated with what we were hearing in the interview research program about creating this peace of mind proposition. And so what goes into a kind of peace of mind proposition? Well, as I've just discussed, talked about cybersecurity, which telcos can offer. Another thing here is complete Wi-Fi. So that's not just having great Wi-Fi near the router, but being able to reach into different rooms of the house, ensuring people can stream high quality content throughout their homes. And telcos can help by creating mesh networks to achieve this. Another thing is cellular failover. So that's ensuring that Wi-Fi broadband stays up by allowing routers to automatically connect to cellular connectivity. So, and another thing that came out, and this came out, is that reliability is not just about uptime and being a consistent service, but simplicity is also a part of reliability. And customers, and here you can see a quote from a Western European operator saying customers want simplicity, sell them outcomes, not products. So those are all the findings I wanted to touch on. Just before I hand over to questions, just want to say that the findings we've shown here, just a tiny fraction of what we got from the conjoint analysis. It's a really powerful tool. It gave us many data points, I think 100,000 data points, particularly around cybersecurity. And we think that it can be really useful. And so we'd encourage you to get in contact. And we'd be very happy to kind of talk through in real time some of the findings, which has been done across multiple markets, so we can look at them at a country level, even at a competitor level, as respondents indicated which broadband service provider they were buying from. So that's everything I wanted to cover. So I think we can hand over to questions unless there's anything else people on the panel want to add.
Yeah, hi. Thank you very much, Darius. Thank you very much, Nick. Just before we turn over to questions, and I can see lots of questions coming in, thank you, all of you who are submitting your questions. Just to follow up on what Nick was saying, yeah, to remind you, this slide deck will be available. We sent out to you tomorrow along with a recording of the webinar. We are also going to be producing a report, sort of A4 format, sort of Word format report very soon, and we'll be publishing that too, which goes into a lot more detail. This is a bit of an overview, a lot more detail of all the findings and what we found with that. What I'd like to maybe just a couple of questions, which I guess are more clarifications on the research itself. There's a question that's just come in from Varun that's asking a little bit about who the respondents were and what was their relationship with the broadband service. So I think what Varun is asking is who were the respondents? Were they only users or were they owners of broadband services? So perhaps, Darius, could you just address that question regarding the respondents?
Yeah, sure. So we had a pretty wide panel. There weren't too many filter questions. As you should have seen, yeah, it was anyone above age 25 because we wanted to rule out kind of people who might be more on the student side or might not be, living independently, and so probably wouldn't be kind of purchasing in a similar way to others. So it does exclude kind of a youth customer segment, which I think is still a big part of the consumer market, obviously. And then in terms of kind of one of the questions that we asked up front, and we didn't exclude people based on the response, but we do have the number of people that were in each bucket, was are you responsible for the decision for the broadband service? And also another part of that matrix is, do you pay? And what we saw is that I think it was almost 70% of respondents were responsible and paid for the service, or were responsible but didn't pay. So they all had a choice, or they all influenced the decision, if that answers your question.
Okay, thanks, Baron. Obviously, Baron said thanks. Obviously, that was answered. I guess it's just a chance for me to reintroduce the panel. There's a question here about who's on the panel. So the panel is consisting of Darius and Nick, who presented, and we'd like to invite Michael Dennis from Cisco to join. And Michael's got a lot of experience with security, both for working with operators to deliver security services to consumers, but also to small businesses. So I guess I'm going to direct one of the questions that's coming to you, and that is, there were some numbers presented here in the presentation about the kind of price points, and what I wanted to send over to you, Michael, is in your experience, what do we think people are prepared to pay for cybersecurity services from broadband providers?
Hi, Phil. Thanks for the question. Well, there's a few ways to look at this on how to price it. And what we've learned is that most broadband providers can sell cybersecurity to their base at a certain price point. What we've learned is it shouldn't be the charge should be no more than 10% of what they charge for broadband connectivity. So if they're charging €30 or $30, it shouldn't be anything more than $3 or €3. Some markets, it's even less. We've seen markets where there's broadband connectivity packages where it's €15, $15. And we've seen people charge around €2 for that. And what the product managers and most CSPs have learned is that there is price resistance once you go over the 3 number. Something psychological there, I'm guessing, just basic consumer resistance to spending or committing to extra spend every month on their bill. My personal penchant for how to price this is, it shouldn't really be more than the price of a cup of tea or a cup of coffee. It shouldn't raise an eyebrow. Yet there is demand and people are willing to accept the charge if they think they're getting value. And with COVID-19, we've seen with all our customers, we've seen this conversion rate, which is so much higher than we've seen before, where people now know they need to have security at home and they are willing to pay.
And I'm going to follow up with a question from Maxim, which is, Maxim's asked for a little bit more detail on what are the cybersecurity products. In other words, I guess, what is the security that consumers are asking for? And can you provide us with a very brief overview, Michael, of what security services are being asked for and being offered?
Well, there's two things they're looking for, which are being driven by consumer awareness. What they've learned about is that what people have learned about is there's potential malware that could be installed on any computer by people going to a website such as a news organization, be it a Bloomberg or a CNN, and clicking on a link. And in the background, potentially that website has malicious infection, and the software would be downloaded that might take control of the computer, or it might be used for an attack against some kind of institution within that country. So people know they're exposed, and they want to have some kind of security blanket that would prevent that happening. Ironically, my younger sister is super smart. Last week, clicked on a link when she was looking at an Irish newspaper. She looked at some fashion link, and her computer got compromised. So the first person she called was me, the United States, to try and fix it. So this is quite common. So malware command and control is the first thing people are trying to get protected against. And then also phishing emails, where you might get an email from somebody saying, "Hi, I'm your long lost auntie living in South America. Please send me $10,000 and I'll send you $1 million." Those emails sometimes have malicious links or software embedded into them that's bad. And people are looking protection against that. And that's 90% of the threat that's out there for consumers today. Sometimes they think, oh, my SP should be protecting me. But all this activity is beyond the edge of the network that the SP provides. So this is something where people need their own protection. They can't expect an SP to provide that protection to them.
Okay, well, thank you for that overview of the key. I've got another question here from Daniela for Darius, which goes back to one of the specific charts that you presented, Darius. And the question that Daniela is asking is, the willingness to purchase cybersecurity from broadband providers appears to go down with age. Why do we think that's the case?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question, and I think it actually ties to a chart that Nick also presented, which was looking at product set versus price sensitivity in the conjoint analysis for age groups as well. And the reason that it's interesting is because, as Nick rightly said, it goes against a lot of what we've heard from operators in terms of when you segment by age, you expect the older population to be a bit more product orientated. They want the best service because they just want the peace of mind and they just want the ease. So it was interesting, and I think the reason why it differs in cybersecurity is potentially is because of that tech maturity and that understanding. So because the older population had less knowledge of the specific threats, so still aware that cyber crime was something to be aware of, and cyber attacks is something that could happen to them, but less aware of the specific threats. When you get down to purchasing a specific product, because they don't know necessarily which products apply directly to them, then price comes into it a little bit heavier. And so their reliance on, well, I'll purchase a service because it's within my price range, as opposed to, I know I really need device hijacking protection, and so I will pay for that service. And so there's that interesting trade-off between, I think, understanding of the specific threats and therefore the price you're willing to pay for the specific products. And I think, again, that ties into a point that Nick made where Bundle D came out on top. So the Bundle D was where we had a cybersecurity product that had all of the attributes in. So it was kind of an all-in-one offer, and that's scoring the best. And I think that was because consumers kind of want that peace of mind, and because some people do have a lack of understanding of the specific threats. They know cyber attacks are a thing, but don't know the specifics. They just want to know that they're safe, and so that they will pay for that all-in-one bundle. But when it gets to the older generation, they'll just pay slightly less. So I think it's an interesting trade-off, but yeah.
Okay, and I have this curious theory that it's about them having children, but I'm not sure we've any evidence for that at all. So I'm going to move on to the next question, which is, yeah. So the question we've got here, following on for Michael again. This question is been raised by John, and John's asked, given the low ARPUs we see in many markets, are there any significant costs associated with delivering these sort of security products? And who bears these costs? And I think that John's question, I guess, is that this is all well and good, but are operators going to have to take on some significant costs if they try and launch these products? So they've got a big maintenance, a big support challenge. So push that back to you, Michael, about the cost of trying to service lots of customers with a low ARPU revenue product.
Thanks, Phil. Well, there is no, and I can imagine they expect, well, most SPs expect there's a truck roll and there's software infrastructure costs on top of just the operational marketing costs. With our solution, it's all done through the cloud, and it's SaaS based. So all that's required is to configure your IP traffic and point it to us. With that, it makes it very easy. And we've deployed our software in a market where the ARPU was $11, and they deployed it with over 100,000 of their customers paying that, who pay $11 a month. So it can be deployed in a low ARPU market. Naturally, all it really is required is somebody to have a good brand and the desire to provide cybersecurity. And on the back end, the other cost that people are concerned about is that there's a care issue. We have a super low false positive rate because our software has been around for 20 years and focused primarily on large enterprise. So, little or no cost. It's all about internal cost of making the effort of launching cybersecurity, and that would be the same for any service to launch a new revenue stream.
Okay, thank you. I've got a question for you, Nick, and this goes back to some of what you set out with the question has been raised by Martin, who's asked, is there a race to diversity in order to try and win market share? And if there is this race in this battle, who's well placed to win given the ideas that we voted on earlier? What do you feel from the analysis, from the research, and from the conversations? What do you feel is best placed to build loyalty and customer lifecycle value among broadband consumers?
It's a good question. I think addressing the first part of the question, I wouldn't classify it as a race to win market share. I think what we heard back from our interview program was that a lot of telcos, and it depends, it varies, there are different views of what the main attraction for them is with these new digital services. But what we heard back quite often was that these services should be supporting their core services, and they're there to, particularly as one operator speaking about cybersecurity, it's about creating stickiness. Not necessarily trying to drive consumers onto higher ARPU packages, although that is obviously a great advantage, but creating stickiness and reducing churn.
Thanks for that. I've got a couple of quick questions for you, Darius. If you could fire them off quickly. There was a specific question from Michelle regarding slide 16, which is a definition of concierge services. And before you answer that, a very unrelated question, but you might want to follow up with from Dr. Singh, which is more about, are the skills there in operators to exploit these opportunities, and how are operators gearing up for bridging? If there is a skills gap, how are they gearing up for bridging that skills gap? So two totally unrelated questions, but I thought I'd give them both to you to answer in one go.
Sure. So the first question was about concierge services, and the way that we had defined this in the survey was things like events and deals and purchasing, any kind of micro service through almost like for O2, for example, they have My O2, I think it's called, or O2 Priority, and so you can purchase services through them, and operators can create they can create a product service around this, and to give kind of deals around events and restaurants and things like that. So it's kind of concierge, and in the way a hotel might kind of point you towards certain restaurants, you can get deals and you can get revenue streams from that as a telco as well. And so I guess some level kind of moving in towards advertising space. And the second question, so if I've understood it correctly, was looking at kind of are telcos actually prepped and ready to move into these services that we're suggesting? And I think it's kind of like a trade-off between yes and no. Yes, I think they are, in the sense that a lot of the products that we looked at here were around this building of trust and reliability, and telcos have that brand. They're seen as this regulated and quite heavily kind of regulated brand. They're very trusted, and when you consider in a lot of these application areas that GAFA and Google, Amazon, Facebook, the internet giants are making plays there, they're under a lot of fire about data privacy, about trust, especially when we think in the smart home. Yes, they have smart speakers, but would people really want a kind of internet giant solution looking after their smart locks and knowing more about when they're coming in and out of the house, or providing them a lot of marketing or personalized adverts kind of throughout the home? And I think most people would say no, whereas the telco providing some of those solutions, or at least integrating some of those solutions, probably seen as a softer touch. They're already strong presence in the home, and so I think from a brand wise, yes, telcos are primed. And I think one of the things that I mentioned was this longevity. So where kind of startups moving into this space might not be seen as being here in a couple of years' time. Where are they going to be if I buy a solution from them now? Telcos don't have that. Telcos have been around for a long time, and probably will be around for a long time. And I think consumers get that. So from a brand perspective, yes. I think from an internal skills perspective, we always talk about the fact that telcos are a little slow. There's a lot of internal kind of hoops that have to be jumped through. There's a lot of teams that have to be aligned on and have to come together. But in essence, telcos have the skills and they're developing the skills to reach out to consumers through AI, through analytics. They're developing a lot of kind of they go to market in their channel and becoming more digital. And so these things are already happening in terms of moving towards self-care and having that broadband part to kind of reach out to consumers. That it's not a huge step to then go beyond and start selling these applications. And it's something that we as STL are trying to push telcos towards, and moving kind of further up from beyond connectivity into kind of application enablement and even the solutions themselves. But we think there will have to be some level of investment. And one of the things that we've spoken about previously is this idea that telcos can often be seen as moat builders, in the sense they invest in a lot of capex to build their networks out and make sure that their performance is up to scratch. And that traditionally was their carved niche. And the kind of internet players, or the more kind of application players, didn't have that, and so the telcos were heavily needed. Whereas these kind of internet players are starting to move more towards that, and moving towards more infrastructure plays. And so the moats that telcos have built are starting to dry up a little bit. And so we're trying to push telcos to move some of that capex to invest now in R&D and move towards more OpEx. So I think there is a financial change that has to happen. But I think it's something that telcos could do, and they're very well positioned in the market, especially for smart home, for cybersecurity, and for the telehealth stuff. I know I said for B2C it's maybe a little difficult, but specifically in B2B, telcos are very well suited to this market. So quite a long-winded answer to that, but hopefully.
Thanks, and I am conscious of time. We've only got a few minutes left. I've got a couple of quick questions for you. I think these will be quick, Michael. One is a follow-up question from Baron, which relates to the specific affordability of phishing and hijacking protection only. And somewhat related to that question, there's a question from Susanna, just to clarify whether the numbers we've shown here is a price per device or a price per home.
Price per home, price per broadband connectivity. And sorry, Phil, the first question was around is it phishing and malware?
I think Baron was asking, we discussed these different bundles, and he was asking, is there a slightly different affordability if you just wanted phishing and hijacking protection? So I guess no malware protection.
Oh, we wouldn't recommend that at all. It would be a bit like getting a windscreen and wipers not connected up, turn on. We would think that you'd be running, you could be flying, you could be flying exposed or into the internet. So
your main point there is the malware is the bedrock, right? And having an up-to-date, highly effective malware is like the starting point, and you can look for options beyond there, but that's not one that you would ever consider. Well, I think that's really helpful.
No, you need a base level of security efficacy, so that you are protected.
Great. I think there's a couple more questions, but they've been covered. I guess the last question I want to get back to is one raised by Anil. And his question is, was this done during or at what point of the impact of COVID? Both, I think his question relates both to the interviews and to the survey. And I guess more broadly, and I'll ask you, Darius, to briefly answer that, and then I'll turn to Michael. I know we've touched on COVID, but I think more broadly, how much do we think these are influenced by events, in other words, the findings, and then how applicable do we think they are in the longer term? So I guess there are two parts of that question. So quickly, given the time available, if you just within a minute, Darius, could you quickly try and address that?
Sure. So I think the first thing is that the interview programs was both of these were run as COVID was taking off and then kind of at peak. But the way that we phrased the interviews and a few of the survey questions was kind of pre-COVID, how did you do this, and then now. So a lot of the trends in the context that we spoke about at the beginning looked at what was the changes now due to COVID, but also looked at prior to that, what were the generic trends that were happening over the past 2 years. So a bit of both. And I think in terms of the longevity of it, yes, I think that COVID will have impacted consumers' views and some of their responses in terms of how relevant some of these things are, or whether they feel they need to be protected. But I think it will have created a lasting change because the knowledge doesn't go away. And yes, the idea that you're not stuck in the home might change, but there's still going to be significant changes in terms of a lot more people working from home, a lot more people wanting to do things remotely.
And Michael, quickly, you've got about 15 seconds. Your views on how does COVID change all this?
What's changed for us now is that security is not an optional feature anymore that people want. It's a requirement moving forward. The question for all SPs and their consumers is, how do we enable it?
Okay. Well, thank you both. Thank you, Cisco, for sponsoring both the research and this webinar. Thanks everyone for attending, for your questions. As I say, we'll be sending out the deck. We'll be sending out a link so you can review the presentations online as video, and we'll also be getting back to you. We've actually managed to answer most of the questions, so I don't think there's a lot of outstanding questions. There's a handful, and we'll try and respond to those in about a week's time. So thanks, everybody, and stay safe.